I have always loved movie trailers. Now, Jen and I are completely different when it comes to this. Trailers are meant to tease us. They share some of the best scenes and lines to get us to go see the movie when it comes out. But Jen thinks that these scenes spoil the movie. I'm on the opposite side of the fence on this issue. I love movie trailers so much that when we go out to see a movie, I consider it arriving late if we get there and the previews have already started. It doesn't matter that the movie hasn't started yet. That's half the reason I go out to the theater in the first place. And one of my favorite recent movie trailers is for the superhero movie Captain Marvel. It's a movie about Carol Danvers, a former Air Force test pilot who gains these incredible powers and how she saves the world. It's a great movie if you haven't seen it, or the movie trailer, and I highly recommend it because I'm a huge superhero movie nerd. So if you haven't seen the movie, or if you haven't seen the trailer for some reason, spoiler alert. The reason I love this trailer is because it shows some of the challenges that Carol faced throughout her life. It shows her as a young girl crashing a go-kart at a county fair and getting knocked to the sand by a bully at the beach. It shows her as an Air Force cadet falling off of a rope obstacle course and in the midst of a plane crash. And after falling each time, Carol stands up again. And the words flash across the screen, discover what makes her a hero. It's clear from the trailer that Carol Danvers isn't just a hero just because she has superpowers. What makes her a hero, what makes her Captain Marvel, is that every time she falls, she gets back up again. Every time she gets knocked down, or makes a mistake, or is told that she's a failure, she rises again. I know it's just a superhero movie. An idle tale, if you will. But every time I watch the trailer, it pulls on my spirit. It tugs on my arms, my legs, my heart. It makes me feel like I can do anything. That's the power of hope. It reminds us that we can defy expectations. Hope gives us the energy to overcome the challenges we face. Hope reminds us that we don't have to be afraid because we are braver than we believe. Hope helps us see that we're not defined by our failures and our fallings. When we fall down, hope helps us rise again. And as people of faith, on Easter, we discover the deepest source of our hope. Early in the morning, a group of Jesus' followers showed up to his tomb. These faithful women showed up to anoint his body, to care for the dead as a way of processing their grief. But when they approached the tomb, they found that the stone covering the entrance was rolled away. The tomb was empty, and Jesus' body was gone. Confused and at a loss, the women tried to make sense of what they weren't seeing. when two heavenly figures showed up and asked them, "Why do you seek the living among the dead?" Now, the women weren't just confused at the sight of the empty tomb, they fell to the ground filled with fear. But the message wasn't over. Don't you remember what Jesus said? He told you that the Son of Man must be handed over to sinners and be crucified, and on the third day, rise again. That's when the women began to see. The tomb was empty because it was the third day. Even though Jesus faced suffering and experienced death, it was the third day. And on the third day, he was going to rise again. The women came to the tomb expecting to mourn. And instead they found an empty tomb, and they weren't afraid anymore. Because the tomb had been transformed by resurrection. Power of the resurrection gave them new hope. That hope gave them the energy to rise up off the ground and go tell the other disciples. That hope made them the first preachers of the mystery of the resurrection. Christ has died. Christ has risen. But the other disciples don't believe these preachers. It seems to them an idle tale. The disciples abandoned Jesus to save their own skins. They couldn't risk following him. They couldn't even risk going to the tomb that morning like those brave women. And now they wouldn't risk having their hopes raised by a flight of fancy. They wouldn't risk believing the women. If any of the disciples had a reason to not believe the message of these preachers and the gospel that they shared, it was Peter. He did more than abandon Jesus at the moment of his greatest suffering. He did more than just forget the words and lessons of his teacher and friend. The last time Peter saw Jesus alive, he denied ever knowing him 3 times. It was one of the lowest points in Peter's life. But after hearing the words of the women, Peter didn't stay down with the other disciples. Peter allowed himself to hope. And that hope helped him rise again. In fact, in the original Greek, the same word that's used to describe what Jesus does on the third day is used to describe what Peter does after hearing the message that the women have to share. Rise again. Rise again. Hope moved Peter's lungs and legs so he could run and see for himself. Hope filled his eyes as he saw the empty tomb. Resurrection hope broke through Peter's shame, and he was able to return home, marveling. See what I did there? Marveling at what he had seen. The story of that first Easter morning is full of people who've been knocked down by death, fear, and shame, and how they rise again. And on Easter morning, when we look at the empty tomb, we have the opportunity to rise again. Because rising again is what we do as people of faith. Resurrection is more than something that happened to Jesus once a long time ago. And resurrection is more than something that we can look forward to when we die. Resurrection gives us hope. Resurrection is what makes us a people of faith. Resurrection makes us alive right here and right now. Resurrection helps us rise. When we feel trapped by fear, or when we are confronted by things beyond our comprehension, the empty tomb sets us free. The hope of resurrection helps us remember the lessons we learned from Jesus. Resurrection hope helps us to see we don't have to keep looking for the living among the dead. Resurrection helps us hear the gospel from some unexpected places, out of the mouths of babes, if you will. We can rise again, to live with courage and vulnerability. When we find ourselves challenged by truth, when we are tempted to limit God's love only to those places that we expect it to be, the message of Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary the mother of James, and the other women with them reminds us of the unexpected power of God. Resurrection hope stretches our imaginations and helps us to see that there is more to this life than we can see and know. We can rise again because God's love knows no bounds and God's love is persistent. When we are confronted with our own shame, or the shame that other people place on us, resurrection lifts us up. The hope of resurrection helps us to see that the story of God's grace is not an idle tale. Resurrection hope helps us receive and extend the gift of mercy to all those who are buried under shame. Resurrection gives us the energy to rise again. We can rise again and run to the tomb and see for ourselves that it is empty. Jesus' empty tomb shows us that suffering and death do not have the last word. Resurrection gives us hope that love will always win. And that hope helps us rise again. As people of faith, we're invited to come to the empty tomb ourselves this morning. We are invited to see for ourselves the mystery of faith. Christ has died. Christ has risen. Christ will rise again. Amen.